Hey everyone, welcome back to another Roman Reacts. We're here today to watch another video. This is the final up-to-date video with the Wizards and Warriors, the oh, excuse me, frog in my throat. So it's the last video that we to catch up with Wizards and Warriors and the Black Crusades. So we're going to be giving this a watch, have a go, just to see how this all turns out. And yeah, just dive on into the lore of Warhammer 40k and learn about the Black Crusade. So without further ado, let's just get onto it, okay? So from my understanding, this is going to be the fourth Black Crusade that they're going to be discussing. There might be a few things here and there that we might catch up with, but yeah, we're going to be delving into this lore and truly understand like what's at stake. Let me, my camera, I should do. I always try and adjust this thing. Every time I was doing the other chat music one, I was wanting to move it out of the way for people to read it, so I haven't been able to fix it correctly since. But that's okay. So here we go.
The long war continues. The brave forces of the God Emperor are outplayed at every turn by an enemy that can strike and disappear at will within the immaterial folds of the warp. There, no loyal soul may hope to follow and escape damnation, leaving the archenemy's next desecration to fester and grow under the malevolent auspices of the Chaos Gods. Despite what his reputation may suggest, Abaddon has proven to be guileful and elusive. Thrice has the despoiler struck at the Imperium in honor of the Four, his Black Crusades leaving scores of systems burning across the galaxy, and billions of souls screaming in torment through the Empyrean. To make matters worse, Imperial propaganda prevents the fragile Imperium from learning from its mistakes. At the end of each incursion, armies of adepts and inquisitorial lackeys hasten to cover their shame under layers of misinformation and zealous dogma. Abaddon's long war is proceeding exactly according to plan. And if the Inquisition in your own mind is busy covering up what you can't bear to face in life, then you too are inviting chaotic incursion of a far more real kind, one that can be prepared for and averted with our paid partner today, BetterHelp, at betterhelp.com/wizardsandwarriors.
I heard a few things about this. BetterHelp is a bit of a scam currently, so don't go into it, okay?
BetterHelp connects you with credentialed therapists to discuss whatever it is you need to, or even to help work out what it is you need to face. And while therapy's been around for a long time, BetterHelp takes a new approach to make it convenient for you. Unlike classic therapy options, they aren't about face-to-face meetings in someone's office. They bring a professional therapist into your life via your phone, video chat, or even messaging, whichever you prefer. Mix that with extremely flexible schedules and personalized choices for the type of therapist you'd like, and you've got an easy route to the help you need. From struggles realizing your ideal self in 2025 to help with issues that you may have been dealing with for a while, BetterHelp can connect you to someone who knows what to do after filling out their introductory questionnaire. Get started via our link in the description, betterhelp.com/wizardsandwarriors. This link gives a 10% discount on your first month to help you give BetterHelp a go. It is the first year of the 34th millennium. More than 1,000 years has passed after the destruction of the host of Talamin and the desecration of St. Gustal. In this time of relative peace, no loyalist soul had neither seen nor heard the tale of the dreaded Black Legion. Small skirmishes, petty civil wars, and minor campaigns had been the order of the day for the Emperor's faithful. But Abaddon's terrible will was to be made manifest once again. From the deepest, darkest recesses of the Sea of Souls, unholy whispers emerged. The War Master was coming. Behind him marched all the armies of hell, millions of demons born of torment and bent on slaughter. Among their ranks were thousands of fallen angels of death, veterans of millennia of war, and privy to terrible truths that would shatter the minds of the faithful, and countless lost mortal souls, human, mutant, and alien alike, hateful of all that reminded them of the depth of their fall. The defences of the Cadian Gate were to be put to the test once again. The Fourth Black Crusade had begun. Heretical choirs rose from 1,000 ships, prophesying the destruction of the God Emperor's realm. From the battlements of the Cadian castles, vows of defiance and faith were renewed. The soil of Cadia would once again be slick with the blood of the faithful and the heretic, but it would not be upon this unhappy world that the Fourth Black Crusade would be decided. From the bridge of his dreadful flagship, Abaddon looked upon the worlds of the Emperor. It had once been his greatest honor to conquer and defend them in the name of the Master of Mankind and his father Horus. But the Emperor was now a rotting corpse, and so was his great lie. Horus was also gone, the memory of his final twitchings still racing through the despoiler's right arm. In truth, Abaddon himself was also dead, or at least so was the man he had once been. There was little to no trace left of the warrior who had called the likes of Tarik Torgadon, Hasta Sejanus, or Gavial Loken friends and brothers. If that man could see himself now, he would be disgusted beyond words or rational thought. Yet this did not bother the War Master in the slightest. He too was disgusted at the fact that he had once willingly shed blood in the name of an uncaring and deceiving tyrant. A man who had abandoned the Great Crusade to hide himself on Terra, while his warriors fought and died for him. A man who spat upon the petty superstitions of primitive religions, all while surrounding himself with all the apparalia and titles of a god. A man who had slaughtered billions in the name of his truth, even while cloaking himself in centuries of lies. A man who had demanded absolute loyalty and trust, and yet refused to even share his name. A man who had stabbed his warriors in the back and given over the reins of the Imperium to self-serving, blind, mortal bureaucrats who shed blood with the stroke of a pen rather than a sword. The fruits of the Emperor's lies were now laid bare before him. The Imperium, once mighty enough to swat his forces like a fly, was but a shadow of its former self. The realm truly was made in the image of its master, a rotting, half-dead carcass fueled by hypocrisy and lies. It was only right to end it, once and for all. Humanity deserved better than what the Carrion Lord had decreed for it. Abaddon's aim was set. This time, the War Master's attention would be drawn to the world of Elfanor. This planet lay outside of the Segmentum Obscurus, and acted as the gateway to the heart of the Imperium. Its capture would open up the way to Segmentum Solar, where Holy Terror itself lay. Despite its remote location, Elfanor was still considered to be part of the Cadian Gate. Its strategic location had seen it rise in importance. Awe-inspiring fortifications had thus been erected to cement the planet as a linchpin of Imperial defences against the Eye of Terror. At the heart of Elfanor's bastion stood the grand citadel of the Cromarch, which overlooked the vast fertile plains that saw the planet and its surrounding systems fed. This mighty bastion rivaled and even exceeded many Cadian castles in its magnificence and impregnability. Ever since the days of the Horus heresy, Elfanor had protected the Segmentum Solar from the vileness of the witch, the mutant, and the heretic. Many among the Black Legion had unsuccessfully attempted to breach its walls in the past, losing countless brothers in the attempts. Throughout those long and storied centuries of martial glory, Elfanor had been under the governorship of the line of the Cromarchs. Unlike too many of the decadent and self-indulgent aristocratic houses of the Imperium, the Cromarchs had distinguished themselves as a line of heroes and duty-bound leaders of men. Time after time, the scions of this ancient bloodline had driven off invasions from heretics, demons, and Chaos Astartes alike. From atop his dark throne in the midst of the demon worlds of the Eye of Terror, Abaddon had decreed that Elfanor's defiance would finally be brought to an end. The Grand Citadel would be burned to ash, and Cromarch's line would be extinguished, and the road to Segmentum Solar would be opened up for the War Master's plans. And while the world would be ravaged beyond recovery, a fourth objective, even greater than the rest, would be achieved. After once again dedicating the bulk of his forces to bog down the loyalists upon Cadia, Abaddon flooded Segmentum Obscurus in death and suffering. Planets were sacked, men, women, and children were sacrificed to the Chaos Gods, and entire cities that had survived the terrible millennia of Long Night disappeared under a flood of blasphemy and demonic bloodletting, never to be seen again. The dauntless armies of the Emperor were hard-pressed to stem the tide. Whenever one fire was extinguished, 10 others emerged throughout the Imperium, forcing the defenders to brave the hostile paths of Hell itself while at war with its dark masters. Abaddon, however, had no such issues. For him, the ways of the Immaterium were as calm and docile as they could get, paving the road for his forces to the doomed world of Elfanor. It was with indescribable horror and disbelief that the astropathic choirs upon Cadia and Holy Terror learned of Abaddon's emergence near Alphanor's Mandeville Point. This was the closest the despoiler had ever got to the throne world itself. The messages were re-verified again and again. Hundreds of astropaths were lost to the effort, some burned to withered husks, brought to the limits of their abilities by the strain of psychic telecommunication. Others were driven insane by the warp echoes of legions of demons feasting on the flesh and souls of terrified, screaming civilians.
Yikes.
Some had to be put down by the defenders of terror after the Neverborn breached their mental defenses and wore their bodies like puppets of meat and sinew. In the end, the news was the same. Abaddon had descended upon Elfanor with all the fury of chaos at his back. The Chromarch vowed to fight the archenemy to his last breath, but begged the throne world to muster what reinforcements it could to assist him before it was too late. The siege of Elfanor began in earnest, promising to be the bloodiest engagement of the Fourth Black Crusade. The Chromarch took direct control of his forces and turned every inch of his beleaguered planet into a killing field. Black Legion drop pods and troop transports landed on key locations around the planet, disgorging half a dozen warbands upon its surface. The heretics spread on the world like a plague, slaughtering everything in their wake. Yet despite the fury of their enemy's arrival, the Chromarch knew that any force was vulnerable in the first stages of a planetary assault. This offered the Imperial Guard an early opportunity to bleed their foes. Using their home field advantage to the fullest, the Chromarch's men ambushed the heretics throughout the plains of their beloved world. Heavy bolter and lasfire roared from well-concealed positions as assault teams emerged from the tall crops, cutting down their enemy before melting back into the greenery. Meanwhile, choke points were mined and detonated at the most opportune moment, dooming the heretics to an ignoble end. Whenever the archenemy attempted to close with the elusive Elfaronians, the Chromarch would call down massive artillery strikes from the citadel itself, smashing even Astartes' power armor to bits. Abaddon seethed. This would not be the easy desecration of Gestal he imagined. It would be a long battle of attrition that would cost his legion dearly. Slowly but surely, however, the Black Legion's weight of numbers and Abaddon's leadership began to dominate the field of battle. The Citadel's guns were hard-pressed to keep up the momentum, and soon enough, the Black Legion got wise to their tactics. The fallen Astartes were held back, while the guns roared death on the heretic chaff, only to be unleashed once their ammunition was spent. Wherever the fighting was thickest, the War Master would appear, leading his bringers of despair. Nothing on Elfanor could hope to stand before Abaddon and the demon blade Drachnien. Slaughter and ruin followed wherever he would go, laying low any defender brave enough to stand in his path. To make matters worse, Elfanor's civilian population inevitably began to succumb to the corrupting powers of chaos. Mortal minds were never meant to comprehend the impossibility of the Sea of Souls, never mind witnessing a cursed Neverborn. To look a demon in the eyes was to lose oneself in the suffering, perversion, rage and malice of every single sentient creature in the history of the cosmos. It was to stare down the depths of eternity and realize it had made itself manifest to destroy you. It was to look upon the offspring of your species' collective psyche and understand it had all amounted to something worse than hideous. Elfanor's civilians were not as inured to such horrors as the brave guardsmen of the Astra Militarum. Most abandoned hope and died where they stood, but many took up what arms they could and joined their tormentors in damnation. Whether this was a conscious choice or one imposed upon them by warp-spawned madness was irrelevant. There would be no mercy for wretches such as these. Slowly but surely, the defenders were pushed back into the Grand Citadel. There, they could hope to last long enough for aid to arrive. Every bastion, every crenellation, every single solitary window was manned to the brim with as many guns as the Loyalists could muster. Ammunition dumps were organized, aid stations were set up, and logistic corps were created out of any person unfit for combat. The Citadel was the last bastion where the Emperor's light still shone upon Elfanor, and it would not fall without an apocalyptic fight. The Black Legion, however, was more than happy to give them one. After taking time to regroup and rearm, vast seas of heretics were sent against the walls. Wave after wave, the brave defenders cut down all before them, cursing the heretics for the weakness of their fall. Orbital bombardments from Abaddon's fleet did little to erode the defenders' fighting power. Every single lance strike or macro cannon shell fell upon overlapping void shields, made to resist many times the ordnance thrown at them. Abaddon knew this siege would only end one way. Sooner or later, the Imperium was bound to send help to the Chromarch, trapping his forces between a hammer and an anvil. Every single day spent upon Elfanor brought his forces closer to annihilation. Something needed to be done. Grasping once again the hilt of Draknien, the Warmaster lifted his sword and bellowed a mighty war cry. Taking personal command of his forces, he led the charge straight against the gates of the Bastion, surrounded by his faithful Terminator bodyguard. The heretic horde was whipped into a bloody frenzy at the sight of the chosen of the four leading them against the hated loyalists. The maddened rush of the Chaos forces overwhelmed the defenders with its ferocity and suicidal fervor. The traitors advanced through layers of kill zones and fields of fire, losing thousands of their numbers at every turn. Glassfire and bolter rounds flew against them like hail, cutting down demons and humans at every turn. The defenders threw everything they had in a desperate attempt to blunt Abaddon's charge. For one terrible moment of hope, it looked as though the brave fighting men of Elfanor would succeed in sending the Warmaster packing. By the time the Despoiler reached the gate of the Citadel, only a tenth of his forces were left alive. They were now trapped in front of the Citadel's magnificent gate, pelted on all sides by a barrage of lasfire. Abaddon looked behind him. The great obsidian road to the fortress was littered with bloodied and broken Black Legionnaires. Trapped outside, they pounded desperately on the massive doors, while Imperial Guardsmen rained fire upon them from above. Abaddon's defeat and death seemed all but assured. However, it was at this moment that the Warmaster strode to the impregnable gates of the Chromarch. Raising aloft Draknien, Abaddon struck a terrible blow that echoed above the din of 1,000 guns. Despite being built to withstand the fire of a Titan, the entrance split apart like paper. The Chromarch looked upon the ruin of his castle with horror. In 1 second, the Emperor's loyal soldiers had gone from hope to despair. With a deafening shout of wrath, the Chaos forces rushed inside the citadel like a flood. Every single living being, man, woman or child, was mercilessly butchered by the enraged traitors. Brave soldiers were dismembered and sacrificed as punishment for defying the will of the gods. Innocent civilians were tormented unto death by mortals and Neverborn, feeding the fires of Abaddon's heresy and satiating the warp's lust for human suffering. The Despoiler himself was above such distractions. He had a mission to fulfill. He calmly made his way up the stairs leading to Chromarch's quarters. There, the governor and his family had sought refuge, making their final hopeless last stand. Taking the brave man by the shoulders, Abaddon ripped his head off with his bare hands in a shower of gore. What remained of his broken body, as well as every single member of his bloodline, was given over to the ravening demons who feasted on their flesh. Abaddon's triumph was absolute. The citadel had fallen, the gateway to the Segmentum Solar was weaker than ever, and a powerful Imperial line had been extinguished. Even Imperial propaganda would not be able to hide the depth of this defeat. From the Chromarch's quarters, the Warmaster could hear the chaotic revelry reaching its climax just below. By now, the defenders of the citadel had all been killed, but the bloodletting showed no signs of subsiding. The forces of Chaos were so drunk on slaughter that the inhuman butchery of Elfanor's population had not satiated their lust for death. As soon as the last loyalist soul had been desecrated, the heretic host turned upon itself. Demons and mortals slaughtered each other wantonly in a desperate attempt to satisfy their depraved appetites, dulled after centuries of depravity in the Immaterium. Not even Abaddon himself could have brought this pathetic rabble of lost souls back to order. Yet the Warmaster did not care. They had served their purpose. Discarding the decapitated head of the Chromarch, Ezekiel turned his eyes to the final and greatest objective of all. Standing before him, hidden deep within the walls of the grand citadel of the Chromarch, stood a mighty Necron pylon. It took little effort for the Bringers of Despair to bring the priceless structure low. With its destruction, the wards keeping the Eye of Terror from expanding were inexorably loosened, dealing another crushing blow to a blind and unknowing Imperium. Soon enough, Abaddon's plan would come together, and the Eye of Terror would tear the galaxy asunder, plunging everything into a new age of chaos. Gathering the remnants of his shattered host, Abaddon retreated to orbit. With Elfanor's void shields finally breached, the once thriving world was mercilessly bombarded until it was reduced to a lifeless husk, a dead world. Left adrift between Segmentum Obscurus and Solar, it stood as an eternal monument to the Imperium's greatest humiliation in the Long War, and a grim testament to the depths of Abaddon's ruthless savagery. Thus ends this chapter in Abaddon's gruesome and protracted crusade. To ensure you don't miss any of its future bloody chapters, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.
Man, so much chaos and destruction that he brought. One thing that always bothered me with the Imperium of his Chaos events is that chaos is always depicted as having virtual infinite manpower. Talking about demons, I mean humans, but little to no explanation of where they're getting the numbers of troops. You need to constantly outnumber the Imperial forces almost every engagement. Starting to understand why a lot of 40k fans don't like Abaddon as a character, because he's, even for a villain whose purpose in itself is to feel threatening and unstoppable, he comes as too much. He achieves so many great feats with such ease that the Imperium coming is completely incompetent that he comes out a great giant Mary Sue. I feel the issue with Abaddon is that they look from a guy who loses every time to a guy who actually wins every time. It's like, you don't understand. The issue wasn't so much chaos losing, it was being the same. As it being the same every time. I think him being secret plans for every crusade would have been great. Would have, but have some give and take. Have him fail to spoil a saint and then become a block point for the next phase they has to overcome. Lose at one of these smaller objectives, then to become overcome later. Instead, it just, yeah, we won actually. Yeah. I find it really dumb that it's supposed to Super Citadel able to hold a chaos evasion of her own hand, had just one line of defense and fell as soon as the gate was destroyed. And I find it even more dumb that Abaddon could have destroyed the gate that easily the whole time, yet he wasted 90% of his army in useless assaults first. I mean, at that point, losing the gate shouldn't have made a difference. Defenders still had enough firepower to rout the few surviving traitors. Yeah, I've noticed. I like the bit where the Abaddon of the old word would utterly hate the monster it became, which is true. Before damning himself at the end of the Horus Heresy, he was a great and honorable man. Yes, in the beginning, towards the midpoint of the series, Fail Abaddon was the absolute tool, mainly writers' preferences for him, but later in the series, he was actually questioning and even challenging Horus's choices during the rebellion. And legit, the last book in the Siege couldn't even become the greatest of the characters in the IP, but then came Nasty Erebus and all of that. It literally went away. He got all failed Abaddon once more. Yeah. So from what I have, just it makes sense. It just there's like 13 Black Crusades, and you would think that like at least one of those crusades would have him losing at least one of them, to have him trying to wrangle and control the infighting among his legions and the other Chaos Lords, to try to attempt that he will succeed the next time, but he will promise even more things for them and to achieve his goals. So just it is a giant Mary Sue for certain reasons. Like, why was he able to have that power to begin with and waste all those troops and just take that sword and GW writers need to, I feel like there has to be a new series focusing on the Black Crusades and actually go in detail and in depth, instead of these just lore blurbs that don't actually make sense in the long run. So I think a lot of these people are right that Abaddon, there's no explanation of how he's able to wield this power, because no doubt he had all this stuff to begin with. He could have just easily walked in and destroyed it like easily, and instead, like, maybe is there an explanation for him to like send all those troops? Or did he consider them all to be weak, and he decided to send them out one by one to their deaths, and then him to like, oh, I can do what I need to, and destroy the gates. So yeah, it can be frustrating at times that he's like seems like overpowered, but like it keeps wasting his troops. So a lot of comment. It makes sense why people don't like Abaddon, and why he's not really well thought out character sort of situation. But anyway, regardless, Wizards of Warriors, I do appreciate them doing the lore. It's been very interesting to learn about all the different battles and all the different major events that took place. We are currently 9 more Black Crusades away from the big ultimate one, which no doubt it'll be getting into soon. But as of right now, I will be ending it there. Hopefully you guys enjoyed my reaction and my thoughts. I'll leave a link for Wizards of Warriors up here. I'll also leave a link in the description for the original video. You can check out a random video plus the subscribe button that's right about here. And I'll catch you in the next one, okay? So as always, Romans, salute.